And witchcraft is the belief of all the Zande everywhere. Any illness is caused by somebody, by an evil eye, which is caused by something which is invisible inside the person.
The vibes are already off.
It's a sad girls club today.
Hello, people. It's a Wednesday, and Emily and I are sad.
We are sad. Sad girls club on the podcast today.
Yeah, sad girls club.
Which is funny because today is also when our previous episode is coming out.
Yeah. Hope everybody enjoyed the witch trials. I renamed it last minute to the Witch Trials of Western Europe because I was like, I can't call this a Witch Trials episode. I didn't go to any other continents. So it was literally just Ireland, Germany, Scotland, and England. So I was like, I didn't go to the US. I didn't go anywhere in Asia. I didn't go to, spoiler alert, where we're going today, or South America. So I was like, that's not true. Also, it leaves room if we ever want to go to any of those other places on our witchcraft mini-series. It leaves it open. Emily's hopping up and down in her chair.
Yeah.
She's so excited.
I had to put it down so I'm closer to my microphone.
Yeah, I realize I'm completely turning away. I'm going to move you. Please hold. Do. There we go. So yes, if it's your first time here, my name is Niamh.
And I'm Emily.
And this is the Rowan and Pine podcast. And you just dropped in the middle of a witchcraft miniseries. What are you doing? Go back to the start.
Yeah, at least go back to the start of the series. Also, you keep calling it a mini-series, but we've done like 5 episodes. It's not that many.
Well, what's like a HBO series? HBO is what, like 6 episodes? They usually call them miniseries.
Like in comparison to normal seasons of television that are like 20 episodes.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, American TV is 20 episodes.
True.
TV on this side of the pond tends to be like 5 episodes every 4 years, and you can't remember anything that happened. You're like, oh, I'm so happy for my show to come back. What who the hell are all these people?
I gotta rewatch the beginning again.
Speaking of HBO, I finished True Detective Night Country last night. And it is so good. Ewan hated it. I thought it was amazing because it's a little bit supernatural. And there is a lot of Indigenous representation in it. A lot of
That's cool.
Feminism, female representation in it. Jodie Foster is the main character. It is so good. I highly recommend if any of those things sound up your alley, you Emily, or you listener.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched it yet. If you have watched it, talk to me about it. I don't have anybody to talk to about it. But we also have.
Watched what?
I was just going to say I also finished. Like I feel like I keep updating our listeners, even though not one single person asked. Updating our listeners that I finished Fargo, and there is a sin eater in the latest season of Fargo, and it's inspired me. I really want to do an episode on sin eaters.
Sin eater.
Emily and I are working on that. We're putting in the work on sin eaters.
Yeah.
Because really fascinating.
Super fascinating. We just watched, last night we watched Mrs. Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children.
I've heard of this. I've never seen it. I always think is it similar to Lemony Snicket? Similar vibes?
Similar vibes, just with kind of like the color palette and the strangeness, I guess.
Yeah.
I like the Unfortunate Events better.
Okay.
This one was good. It's just it's for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was good. I turned it on like when our daughter was still awake because I was like, oh, it's like a kids movie. And then I was like, I mean, she's tiny, so she doesn't know what's going on. But as we were watching it, I was like, oh, it's like a little older kids. It's not, not like a little kid movie. But yeah, it was pretty cool. I just like the costumes and the weird stuff. I was going to say something else about it, but Chris O'Dowd is in it.
Oh, cool. I love him.
And it's weird because he's doing an American accent,
Oh no.
But he's struggling with it. I love him,
Yeah.
but he's like, I was like, oh, you maybe should have taken more classes or something, because his accent was just fluctuating between like Midwestern and kind of like New Yorkish and Southern. And I was like, buddy, you got to get it together.
Yeah. I
Are
mean,
you
like,
from Chicago or Dallas?
his character in Bridesmaids, for anybody who's like, who the hell is Chris O'Dowd? He's the inexplicably Irish police officer in Bridesmaids. Like
In Wisconsin? Isn't it in Wisconsin?
It never acknowledges why he does not have an American accent, I'm pretty sure. But
I think they do address the accent at some point in that movie.
But like, I can only imagine that that's because he's so terrible at American accents that they were just like, just do your own accent.
Just be Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that is a little TV recommendation for you. Similar vibes to Dairy Girls. Chris O'Dowd has a semi-autobiographical sitcom.
Okay.
Called Moon Boy, based on his own childhood in Ireland.
I was hoping you were going to say the IT crowd.
No. But yeah, it's really good. If I remember, it's so long since I watched it. I think he plays his own imaginary friend.
Oh, that's funny.
But it's brilliant. Like, he grew up in a house with like all sisters, and his sisters are just like gently bullying him the entire time.
Oh,
It's very sweet. But yeah,
That's
similar
so funny.
vibes to Dairy Girls, like just completely like just very character driven, really like likable, funny characters in it.
Yeah.
And not a whole lot
Irish.
happens, you know.
Very Irish.
But this week we are outside of Ireland for installment number 5, I believe. Yes, 5. Episode 33 of the Roan and Pine podcast. We are going to continental Africa to talk about African witchcraft. Not an easy one, because despite what some people may go on like, Africa is a continent, not a country.
My God.
And is made up of many, many, many different cultures and spiritualities. But it does have a very strong witchcraft tradition and a very strong, even today, affinity with folk magic, folk medicine. So we're going to do some deep diving into it. Right at the top of the episode, I'm going to do a content warning. I will reiterate the content warning before the actual content that I'm referring to. But yeah, we just have some dark things in this episode with regard to violence against women, violence against pregnant women.
So if you're not feeling like that's anything that you can hear right now, maybe
Mhm.
skip this episode for today or tomorrow or however long you need.
Because we try not to go to current event political on this podcast. Like, it's supposed to be a little bit of an escape and a little bit of fun. And it's just, if you enjoy learning about other cultures and maybe even learning about your own culture, that's what we intended to be. We never intended to be dark and something that's going to stick in your head for days after. Like,
Right. We don't want you to have a bad day when you're listening to this podcast.
Exactly. Even if we're having a bad day currently.
We can have bad days, but you're not allowed to.
Yeah, you're not allowed to have a bad day. Positivity always.
Toxic positivity.
Okay, so let's get into it. Many African societies still use native terms connected to witchcraft practices and beliefs, indicating how widespread witchcraft belief is across the continent. The term witchcraft has different names in different languages. For example, Amusu or Igbansi in the Igbo language, Ochu in the Igala language, Opochi or Enebe in Igbira language. Witchcraft is frequently connected to practices that touch on the paranormal or metaphysical and have an impact on the world of humans, coexisting with traditional medicine and folk healing, and it's treated the same, although, as we'll see in many African cultures, it is actually two complete separate systems of beliefs and systems of quote-unquote magic. So just to set the scene a little bit, it's very hard to discuss anything to do with Africa without looking at it in the context of colonialism and what colonialism has done to the continent. But Obviously, there's a very little written record of what existed before. But what we do know is that millions of people in African rural communities had access to traditional medicine prior to what we would call Western or cosmopolitan medicine. For a larger segment of the populace, it served as their only source of healthcare, and healers are referred to by many different names throughout Africa. But just one example, in Zulu culture, herbal and spiritual healers are called sangomas. They protect people from evil spirits and witchcraft, even up to the present day. They usually train with elders for 5 to 7 years, so that's as long as like our doctors would spend in college, pretty much.
Wow.
And perform divination and healing with their ancestral spirits. There's another type of healer in Zulu culture called Inyanga, and they heal people with plant and animal parts. So it's a lot more herbal, medicinal, rather than calling on the ancestors.
Yeah.
Their profession is hereditary and passed down through family lines. So if your mum was one, also the way like doctors work for us, if your parents are doctors, you're probably going to be one too.
Yeah, it's kind of in the family.
There used to be a distinction between the Sangoma and the Inyanga, but increasingly over time in contemporary practice, the terms are used interchangeably, just depending on what you're going to them for. Traditional medicine over the years has waned, obviously, the way it has in every other culture throughout the world. In 1953, the South African Medical Association banned the use of traditional medicine.
My gosh. Here we go.
Yep, it starts. Traditional medicine practitioners in South Africa are actually prohibited from conducting business due to the Witchcraft Suppression Act of 1957 and the Witchcraft Suppression Amendment Act of 1970. So they went back for it twice.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was like where you can see folk healing and folk medicine being lumped in with witchcraft, whereas a lot of these communities wouldn't view them as the same thing.
I just don't understand why cultures have to do this.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you're trying to give somebody tea for their sore throat, which
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I know why they do it, but
yeah, like 1953 South Africa wasn't going to be the most tolerant of traditional beliefs,
right,
for a start. I can understand, and this is absolutely not defending apartheid South Africa, but I can understand from the standpoint of if there's a proven Western medical solution to something,
like
and
antibiotics.
Somebody is availing of folk medicine in place of that and maybe putting themselves or their children in danger. I can understand it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, like when a lot of it can be very harmless and very much, take these herbs that are actually, a lot of them can be proven to have like positive effects.
Right.
What's the harm for a lot of these? You know, supplementary. Don't people use that term supplementary medicine? Or complementary medicine. Isn't that what they say?
I know there's integrated medicine where they kind of take the best of both worlds. Like they'll be able to look at it and say, like I said, this is a situation for antibiotics. Like you have strep throat and you need to get the strep out of your body.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can look at you and, maybe some chamomile tea or something like that. And
yeah.
I wish that places, instead of trying to remove it completely, they could work on an integrated approach.
Yeah. Like the greatest example I think of a natural remedy being better than anything that like Western medicine is like honey for a sore throat. Like most doctors even now will tell you to get like a really good quality, like say Manuka honey or something like that. And they're saying it's better than any like say cough medicine that you could just get over the counter. And I'm talking about just like a persistent like cough, sore throat to relieve those symptoms.
Yeah.
Obviously if you have strep throat, like go get antibiotics.
Yeah.
But
that's really interesting because people always talk about like honey for sore throat, like honey tea. And I'm like, well, when you put it in hot tea, does it, I don't know, like, are you supposed to just like drink the sticky honey? Is that like the point or?
Well, it's basically supposed to coat your throat. So it like makes it easier for you to swallow things and makes it less painful.
Yeah. And
it also has like antioxidant properties.
Interesting.
So it promotes healing and things like that. Not so much, I know honey is like touted as antiseptic and it is, I'm sure, if you're not putting it in hot tea. But yeah, like just from that standpoint, like it's the actual physical properties of the honey.
That's what I was
That is
thinking.
completely harmless and it'll like coat your throat and it'll just make you feel better. I feel like I'm getting like a sore throat just talking about this. I'm like getting like a phantom throat itch.
You're like, where's the honey?
Oh, I'm sad my father-in-law isn't keeping bees anymore. I used to have like
Oh, yeah.
a great honey source.
Aw.
He still has some. I'll go raid some at the weekend.
Is he ever gonna get back into that, or maybe he's not thinking that far out?
We were talking about it. We were saying that like maybe eventually, if it is something that like maybe Ewan can do with him,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of like not really heavy lifting, but there's a lot of like lifting. And just for context, my father-in-law had a stroke last year, so he's doing really well, and his mental capacity is there and all of that, but it's just like physical things
Yeah.
that he's having trouble with. So if it was something that like he could do it and like direct Ewan on what to do, because he's also like he loves teaching people about bees and about honey
That's
and
so
like showing
fun.
you things and all of that. Yeah. Yeah, where was I? Witchcraft has different definitions in different nations and in different communities. Similarly, there is no universal pattern of witchcraft beliefs and practices across all African cultures. For example, the practice of witchcraft in Nigeria frequently overlaps with religion, practices like magic, sorcery, esotericism, and diabolism. So it's really a catch-all. Although, as we've seen, witchcraft was part of African society prior to the arrival of Christianity and Islam, Christian missionaries encountered various practices, including witchcraft, that they deemed to be quote-unquote barbaric.
Christianaries.
The Pentecost... Christianaries. Yeah, that would be way easier to say, wouldn't it? The Pentecostal movement's explosive growth in the 1970s seems to have significantly reshaped the cultural, philosophical, and ideological frameworks supporting witchcraft practices and beliefs. Once again, capital T, capital C, the church.
Also, I've heard like the capital T, capital C church is bad in like most of the sects of religion, but I've heard that the Pentecostal religion is pretty rough.
Yeah, as in like pretty like fire and brimstone. Is it one of those sort of?
Like a lot of brainwashing and like it's not sort of like direct child abuse, but have you seen that video where all the kids are like speaking in tongues and like crying?
Oh, is that what that is? Is that Pentecostal?
Yeah, Pentecostal is like speaking in tongues and like snake charming and like things like that. Just like really like wild shit.
And they're saying that African traditional witchcraft is barbaric? Okay.
Right. Look inside yourself.
That's bold. Much historical research on Africa and the African diaspora has been attempting for over a century to refute ideas that portray Africa as pre-modern. Like it's usually one thing I always think, like when I see Africa showing up in like a BBC news report, it's like it's always going to be showing something that's really dark and will show whatever community it's focused on as sort of backward. And like I notice a lot of that in Western media here. Like when news makes it here from Africa, it's usually really shit.
Yeah.
It's like something awful that's happening. And like obviously, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. You're only going to hear bad news stories.
Yeah.
But there's like this weird fascination. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to get into some of those stories later on. But just to contextualize it as this is very colonial. When you look at the anthropology of Africa, it's very like, oh, this is fascinating. We're studying them like they're like science projects and science exhibits.
Right. There's very much, because like something that I noticed that like really pisses me off is that people always use the example like, I know there's starving children in Africa. And people see Africa as a whole as like this, I don't even know what the word is, but we all know like when people are like, oh, like people in Africa, you see people like out in the dirt wearing like almost no clothing and they live in little huts and things like that. And that's how like people view Africa, even though Africa has like city centers and it's not just like people living in the wild. It's like... And it's really depressing and disappointing because I'm just like, Africa is not just like indigenous tribes living off the land and stuff like that. It's like Yeah.
Yeah, it would be like saying that the US is all like people who live in Appalachia, like people who live really rural, like, small communities, simple lives,
Right. Right. Or it's kind of, because my husband and I watch 90 Day Fiancé. We're terrible. We're guilty of it. People will come to the US from like other countries and they think it all looks like LA and New York City, like the whole country. And then they'll move to like,
Oh, God.
like a little house in the country with like their fiance, and they're like, what is this? Like, where are the big buildings? Where are the fancy cars? And it's like, that's not what the US is.
Yeah, I think like most cultures would be like guilty of stereotyping and like thinking that everything's as you see on TV
Right.
and in films.
Yeah, I think Africa gets the short end of the stick, though.
Yeah, looking in my research for this episode, like looking back, a lot of the research into this topic was done back in one of the big studies, like the 1930s. And this is like a more progressive study that we're going to be looking at from the 1930s. And even then, like, you can totally look at it. You can see the undertones of this whole, like, othering of African people and African culture just being, like, basically, like, they're a zoo exhibit. And obviously that is the way these people thought at the time.
Right.
And it's the threads of that have come all the way down to the present day. People still think that way, even if they're not fully aware of it.
Yeah.
And
it's disgusting.
That it is. For example, the work that's been done to refute those ideas of Africa being pre-modern that I was talking about, claims were made in 1915 that Africa was not part of quote-unquote universal history. However, an American sociologist named Dubois acknowledged that modern Africa, his words, lagged behind Europe, as did many of his generation of sociologists, but he was the first to present the theory that the reason why Africa lagged behind the rest of Europe, this was caused by unfavorable geography and the devastation brought about by the trans-Saharan and Atlantic slave trades, not by the inferiority of the continent's people.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Thank you.
It's like other people did this to them.
Yeah. It's like, what the hell do you expect? They live literally on like the hottest place on earth.
Yeah. A large portion of the country is desert.
Yes. And they have been decimated for centuries. So when you look at like the culture and the inter-community relationships and how religion has evolved, you can see that it's understandable that a lot of people would believe in witchcraft, or they believe in magic, or they believe in these things. In fact, a scholar writing about Tanzania, so I would always pronounce this as Tanzania. I work with people from Kenya and they pronounce it as Tanzania, and they reckon that that's the way it's supposed to be pronounced.
Okay.
So take it up with the Kenyans. Because I said Tanzania and they're like, no, it's Tanzania. Like, okay.
Unless they're pranking
Never heard
you.
that in my life. Yeah, maybe they are. Maybe they just want maybe look bad in front of people.
They're like, I heard she has a podcast.
Yeah, just tell her shit. Just tell her anything. She'll believe it. The scholar wrote, people believe that magicians have the power to cause disease, sickness in animals, bad luck, sudden death, impotence, and other such misfortunes. Witchcraft is a system of cultural and social action woven into the framework of life. Despite efforts to deny it and eliminate it, it exists, and many people in Africa act accordingly. If everybody else believes in witchcraft and this is what you are contending with, of course you're going to like try and protect yourself and your family.
Right.
It's just part of your life and part of your beliefs.
Right.
The post-colonial, this like reinterpretation of witchcraft affected politics at all spheres. So from the state, the family, and even among ethnic groups. It got to the point where government actions were thought to be witchcraft if they were perceived by a particular group as being directed against them, or if they didn't align with the public interest. When a family member poses a barrier to the advancement of one or more of their family members, even in cases where the alleged impediment lacks a spiritual justification, this behavior is also considered witchcraft.
Oh my God.
If a rival group isn't pleased with a policy or action, it's quickly interpreted as witchcraft in both the formal and informal sectors. So it's sort of like this explanation to anything that's like not going your way and not aligning with how you believe that the world should be. And I suppose it's a way of reasoning
Right.
things out.
It's the way that they can mess people up. I'm
Yeah,
trying to think of
'cause,
a
yeah,
more articulate way of saying that, but
it's like justification of like they're committing nefarious deeds and they're committing witchcraft because I am in the right and
yeah.
I have goodness on my side, and it could only be witchcraft is the reason why I'm not getting what I want.
Yeah.
You know?
And it makes somebody question their reality because if they're like, oh, my mom's a witch, and then somebody's like, well, if you believe that they're a witch, then you're also a witch, then it's just like, wait.
Mhm.
And then you like internalize that you're a bad person and that your mom's a bad person, that everybody around you's a bad person. And it's just a way of like getting in there and absolutely ruining everything.
It's also, when you think of it, it's like a form of privilege. Like if you see like a family, one of those families that everything seems to go their way, they're witches. Because that's the only way that things could possibly go well for them all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know some families who are witches in that case. Just kidding.
So, unfortunately, in many parts of Africa, belief in witchcraft has resulted in the targeting of vulnerable populations, including the elderly, physically disabled, and in certain cases, children. There are numerous instances of extrajudicial executions of mostly elderly and disabled people due to these accusations. And we learned all about that in our last episode, so the Europeans weren't absolved of this either. If there's a sniff of witchcraft anywhere, it's obviously going to be like the most vulnerable people in society that are getting the blame for it.
Of course.
So it's still going on up to the present day. I'm going to give you guys some examples, and this is when I'm going to reiterate our content warning. I'll edit in a proper timestamp.
Okay. In post.
In post. I'll just take it out in post. Content warning. Skip to the other ding at 38 minutes. In Ghana, outspoken or eccentric women may be accused of witchcraft. What a shock.
Ghana is where my neighbor growing up was from.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's like the dad of the kids that I was like friends with because we lived right next to
Aw.
each other. But I got to eat a lot of food from Ghana when I was a kid because he was always cooking really delicious
cool.
food.
So in Ghana, they have witch camps. If a woman is accused of witchcraft, she can be sent to live there for the rest of her days. They are said to have been in existence for more than 100 years when village chiefs decided to establish isolated safe areas for the women. The people in charge of them are called tindanas, and they are capable of removing an accused woman from her place of residence so they can shield the community from any witchcraft and also keep her safe from vigilantes, which is just like incredible. It's kind of a better solution than some of the ones that we're going to see. And you know what? If it was in a really good context, going to live with a load of other women who are kind of witchy, that would be great.
Right. It's like you're putting us all together. I mean, could be worse. No.
You and I would have a great time there.
Like, put me with the witchy women.
Yeah. If only it was as utopian as we would hope.
Right. Of course, it's going to be like probably
Yeah.
like Handmaid's Tale bullshit or something.
The camps are run by the local chiefs. They can hold up to 1,000 women.
Holy shit.
Yep. They live in Spartan huts with no electricity or running water.
Here we go. We're going
Yeah.
down.
For example, the inhabitants of the Kukuo camp walk 3 miles each day to the River Otti, struggling back uphill with heavy pots of water.
It's not fun anymore.
And when you think a lot of these women are elderly,
Ugh.
yeah, the women, like speaking to BBC News, said it's a life that they're prepared to endure as long as they are safe. They make a living by gathering wood, selling peanuts, or working on nearby farms. There is a way out of the camps if you're willing to go through it. Women can undergo tests to prove that they are not witches.
I'm sure the tests are...
Mm.
Anyway, just keep talking.
One of the tests is cutting a chicken's throat
Oh.
and then like letting it go. If the chicken lands on its back, it's a sign that she's innocent. I wouldn't want to put my fate in the hands of a chicken whose throat I just cut.
Me either.
Yeah. If that doesn't work and you want another attempt at proving your innocence, you can drink a concoction of chicken blood, monkey skulls, and soil. The woman must consume this without falling ill within the next 7 days in order
What?
for, yeah, they believe that will exorcise the witchcraft from her. So it will like neutralize whatever darkness or evil is inside her. If she does fall ill within the next 7 days, she may take the exorcism concoction again.
My God.
Yeah. But I mean, if you had a family and it meant that you could get out of one of the witch camps, go back to your family and prove your innocence, hopefully be reaccepted by your family,
Yeah.
I think you'd do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God. This is horrifying.
This is why I was saying I put it in the middle because I was like, I can't end on all of this.
No, you can't.
In Eket or Eket, it's Eket. I'm going to say Eket. In Eket, Nigeria, witch children are blamed for causing illness, death, and destruction, prompting some communities to put them through harrowing punishments to cleanse them of their supposed magical powers.
I mean, children are usually the cause of illness.
Yes, definitely. Especially when you lump them all together in a preschool.
Yeah.
You know?
But this doesn't mean we punish them for it.
No. They don't know what they're doing.
No,
they just
don't
want to
know that licking each other's boogers is bad.
Children accused of witchcraft are often incarcerated in churches for weeks on end and beaten, starved, and tortured in order to extract confessions. And the most heartbreaking part is many of those children have traits that make them stand out, including learning difficulties or ailments such as epilepsy, or some of them are just strong-willed, so they're just not listening to their parents for whatever reason, which could also be a form of neurodivergence.
Yeah.
Would be my reading from it.
So we're cool ending the episode here now, right?
It gets worse.
Oh my God.
In Malawi, in 2010, 86 people were jailed with hard labour for practising witchcraft. 61 of them were elderly women, 7 were elderly men, and 18 younger relatives of the other accused. They received prison sentences of between 4 and 6 years. Most of the group were accused by children. Do you remember back in our the Torseker witch trials in the Norse episode? That was children as well. Also, like Salem, it was children started it. One of our Irish cases was children. Who's listening to these kids?
I mean, it's like believe children, but to what point?
Yeah, the children accused these people of teaching them witchcraft, and that's what they were being persecuted for. The strange thing was, witchcraft was actually not a crime under Malawian law, but the government bowed to public pressure by setting up a committee to investigate instances of witchcraft within the community. In 2023, it's still an ongoing problem, and they reckon that it's complicated by the use of folk healers. So people will employ a folk healer and then pressure the folk healer to indicate through divination who had caused the disease that they're seeking a remedy for. So then the folk healers are pressured to give a name, and then witch hunt is launched against whatever name they have given. Wow. So that's where you can see the traditional medicine is intersecting with witchcraft, but it's so crazy that it's just like, who did this to me? Give me a name. And it could be anybody.
It's kind of like people who make false confessions. It's like if people are just like pressuring you and not letting up, like what are you supposed to do?
As well, like if your whole like identity is based on like folk healing, you're not going to be like, oh, I don't know. You know, you're going to feel like it'll lend you more legitimacy if you're able to give a name.
Yeah, right.
And then we have people who have albinism. So that's a lack of pigment in your hair, skin, eyes. In Africa, they face multiple human rights challenges, including experiences of stigmatization and discrimination and harmful practices related to witchcraft. Since 2006, the UN independent expert received information on close to 800 cases reported across 28 countries, mainly in the African region. Women and girls with albinism and mothers who give birth to children with albinism are exposed to extreme forms of violence, such as the hacking of their limbs while they're still alive.
Oh.
I know. Oh. This violence is the result of erroneous beliefs, for example, that sexual intercourse with a woman with albinism can cure HIV or AIDS. Women are often blamed after giving birth to a child with albinism and are accused of being unfaithful or of bringing a curse to their family.
Oh my God.
I know. It's something she has no control over. And there's nothing wrong with having albinism.
Yeah.
As a result, they are rejected by their husbands and abandoned by their communities. They are confined to poverty and further exposed to attacks and other forms of violence and discrimination. Tanzania has a dark relationship with albinism. Witch doctors hunt those suffering from the condition for their body parts, which are used in potions to bring good luck and wealth. Victims can be kidnapped and then dismembered by hired killers or even sold by unscrupulous family members. Like, family members?
Jesus Christ.
Isn't that that's insane. Body parts are reported to have fetched up to $75,000. And the UN estimates around 80 people with albinism in Tanzania were murdered between 2000 and 2017.
Wow.
That is just, it obviously shows like the strength of the beliefs here.
Yeah.
And that there is something driving people to believe these things, that they will like sell a family member or like commit such horrific acts of violence against like another human being.
Yeah.
But like, it's just so crazy that it's still happening like in the modern times.
Yeah. And that people haven't figured out that albinism is like a genetic, I don't know if you should call it a defect, but it's like, it's
an anomaly.
Yeah. It's not anything that anybody can control. It just happens.
And it's heartbreaking that like obviously women are going to be living in fear that like it will happen to them.
Right.
Like, you know, that they'll have a child with albinism, or that they will, you know, somehow be put in danger because of this. Like, it's just so crazy. Like, when you think about like, it all just depends on your community. Like, there are models with albinism, you know what I mean? On like magazine covers and like fronting brands, and like it all just, it's like luck of the draw where you're born, you know?
Yeah. Which is, I mean, it feels like that with so many things about who we are. Like if you're trans, or if you're gay, or if you're even a woman.
Yeah.
Let's say.
Like what you've listed there, it just shows that your belief can be just a product of where you are. There are communities in Western countries that believe horrific things about trans people and about people all along the LGBTQ spectrum.
Right.
It's probably, as I was saying earlier, like it's a very much like a dark fascination in Western media with things that are happening in Africa. But I mean, like, is it really that different when you think about some of the hate crimes that we read about, like going on in our culture, you know?
Right. It's like it's different. It's just directed at different people and in different ways.
Yeah. And it would be very easy to just go like, oh, like, you know, these communities in like Tanzania, they can't govern themselves, or, you know, they're out of control, or like, I can't believe they're doing this to people who they're born that way and they can't help it. But like, you could say the exact same thing here.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
You know,
for homosexuality and things like that. Mm-hmm. Is it?
Yeah.
Do we still say homosexuality? Is that still a thing?
I think so. Yeah.
If it's not a thing, I apologize. And somebody will. Well,
I think you could use the catch-all like queerness. Like,
right.
I think that word's been reclaimed, I believe.
Yeah. So we'll say queerness.
Yeah.
I also looked up how albinism occurs. It's when one of several genetic defects makes the body unable to produce or distribute melanin. Okay. These defects may be passed down through families, but it means that you inherited the gene from both your mother and your father. So both your mother and father have to be carriers of albinism.
Oh, interesting.
Which I kind of figured, because that's how a lot of genetic disorders work, or genetic defects or abnormalities.
So isn't what you said really interesting? That's both the mother and the father?
Yeah, and they're probably just punishing the mother.
Who's getting blamed? The mother.
Right.
She's the one being ostracized from her community.
Well, because she gave birth to the baby, so it's her fault.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it takes two to tango. There's just one oven.
Right. So we're going to pivot out of all of that darkness and just look at a case study of one of the types of witchcraft called the Azande or Zande system of witchcraft.
Hell yeah.
Once a vast empire, the Azande people were decimated by colonial powers, because of course they were.
Because who wasn't?
Because who wasn't? The first European travellers arrived in the 1860s. Towards the end of the 19th century, the Zande came under 3 different colonial administrations. So they were overruled by the Belgian, the French, and the Anglo-Egyptians.
Who are the Anglo-Egyptians?
So it's basically Egypt as a colony of England.
Oh, weird. I never knew about that.
Neither did I until I was looking into this. But it makes sense, and it's why the British Museum has so much of Egypt's shite. Not shite like from an Egypt point of view, but like they just have fucking everything.
It's just funny to hear you go, Egypt's shite.
It's like when I was going to London and like our friend David was like, do you want to go to the British Museum and see all the stolen shit? And I was like, kinda, but I feel like I'll just get really mad.
Yeah. Like, and this was stolen and this doesn't belong to you.
Yeah. Give it back!
You end up doing a protest where you're breaking stuff and running away with it. You're like, I'm giving it back to its rightful owners.
The Brits, they're at it again. Anyway.
I have an entire country here.
Speaking of the Brits, E. Evans Pritchard was one of England's foremost social anthropologists, especially known for his investigations of African cultures and for his explanations of witchcraft and magic. His principal legacy is his 1937 ethnography. It's a hard word to say, ethnography.
It is?
Witchcraft.
Ethnography?
Because it sounds like I've got a lisp.
Maybe because of your accent. It's hard.
Maybe.
Just kidding. The other day, Medardo was like, can you do Niamh's accent? And I was like... Because I'm like... It's weird because I'm like pretty good at like a good amount of accents. And he tells me that. Other people have told me that. But then I was like, oh no. I don't think I can do it.
It's funny because... Yeah, like I think I said it last episode. I feel like I used to be a lot better at accents, but I've like lost my confidence to do them. But most people, when they're doing my accent, like years ago, there used to be this old ad on TV for Donegal Catch, which is like a brand of frozen fish.
It sounds like a dating site.
That would be the most grim dating site, Donegal. Oh my God. Just loads of guys with sheep in their photos and cars. Terrible haircuts. Jesus Christ.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, the Donegal catch ad was it was like these three guys in a fishing boat, and I can't remember what he's saying, that he's been talking to like the bigwigs who own Donegal Catch, and he says they're keeping my idea on file in a filing cabinet. So literally for about a decade, anytime somebody from outside Donegal would meet a Donegal person, they just ask us to say filing cabinet, because it's funny the way we say it, apparently.
Well, that is really funny.
Okay.
You also I feel like your Irish accent isn't as Irish.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watered down in a way.
Yeah. I mean, there's all different kinds. Like Cillian Murphy's accent is technically Cork, but it's very gentle. Like I assume that Hollywood has watered it down for him.
Yeah.
But he's nice to listen to. Whereas the Cork accent usually is not. So Cork people are credited with influencing the Jamaican accent.
Interesting.
Because Cork people will talk like that, and that's the way they go on.
Oh.
And they have this weird like inflection.
They sound like the Midwesterners of Ireland.
Kind of.
You've been watching Fargo.
I assume that they probably had some influence on that as well. It's such a strong accent, so.
Which one?
It's the Cork accent.
Okay.
So I think anywhere they go, like it's the same as the Newfoundland accent in Canada. You would think it was Irish if you heard them, because they use a lot of Irish slang because there were so many settlers. It sounds like a Cork/Limerick accent.
Some people have said that the heavy Minnesotan accent almost sounds Irish.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because like the accents also can be a little bit of a capsule in time. Like they reckon like the American Deep South accent, like say Alabama, that is closer to the accent that Shakespeare had, because when people were traveling to those regions, they brought their accents with them, and the accent stayed, whereas the English accent evolved.
Yeah.
So I think the Globe Theatre on YouTube, if anybody is a nerd and wants to look it up, they will do readings of Shakespeare in the original accent, and it sounds like somebody from like Alabama.
To be or not to be.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's fucking weird. I hate that.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's a time capsule of an accent.
Yeah, I heard that too. I heard that the accents in the US are more similar to what British accents used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But who could know, because none of us were alive at that point.
No.
At least, I don't think so.
If you are, write to us.
Oh yeah, if you are, write to the podcast, please.
Are you a vampire? Are you immortal? We'd like to have you on.
Are you Laszlo?
We have some questions. So his ethnography, witchcraft, oracles, and magic among the Azande. In retrospect, people who have reviewed the work, they've praised it for being one of the first proper studies into African culture and not just an observation. Like, he actually went to these regions and interviewed people and spoke to them, which pat on the back for that. But in retrospect, his report is very much coloured by his skepticism regarding witches. And he spends a lot of time just basically proving that he doesn't believe in witchcraft rather than focusing on the actual beliefs.
Wow.
You know, it's very much like, but I don't believe any of this, which maybe you and I do that on this podcast. I don't know. But. Just for a modern context, the Zande people are now primarily found in the Northern Democratic Republic of the Congo, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic. Who are they? What are they like? What do they do?
Tell me more.
We'll start with their medicine. Azande people apply generally known common sense cures to minor ailments. All serious diseases are attributed to witchcraft and are accordingly combated by magical medicine. The general term ngua, it's Ngua, which originally simply meant plant or tree, once covered both good and bad medicines of every sort, but nowadays it's used to distinguish between protective or curative medicine, which is increasingly becoming known by the Arabic term dawa, and then ngua is used to refer to vengeful medicine, so the bad stuff, the poison.
Is that you, Billy Bob Thornton?
The bad stuff. Magical medicines are used not only to ward off or avenge misfortune, but to obtain successful harvests, human fertility, good hunting, and other benefits, including job promotions and success in examinations. That would be so great. I would like to avail of all of those things. Job promotions.
Yeah.
A good harvest. We all like a good harvest.
We do.
And if you know people who make these medicines, you can literally just go and buy them from them. Like, it's a proper little economy.
That's cool. They've got like a little shop, or maybe you just go to their house.
I would assume their house. So witchcraft permeates every aspect of Azande society, their perception of it as a powerful force used to harm people. Witchcraft, oracles, and magic are interdependent elephants?
Interdependent elephants.
Witchcraft, oracles, and magic are interdependent elements of a belief system. Thus, witchcraft does not interfere with any single chain of mechanical causation, but connects different causal chains in such a way that misfortune is generated. So that's a bit of a word salad. I'm going to give you the example, or like the practical example that E. Evans Pritchard gave.
What a name.
So,
E. Evans?
Yeah.
Pritchard?
Yeah. It's like, pick a name, for God's sake.
It's like, why so many E's?
Yeah. And it's very hard for me to say. Once again, lack of foresight. Pick a better name so somebody in the podcast can pronounce it better. To illustrate the way these systems are connected, the Azande use a hunting metaphor. And it shows the cause and effect sort of relationship. So take someone who's killed by an elephant. There is a connection between the direct cause of their death, for example, the elephant, and witchcraft. Because Zande hunters view things as like a two-pronged system, they would traditionally kill game with at least two spears. So they would say the elephant is the first spear and that witchcraft is the second spear. And together they kill the man. So your witchcraft is like your accomplice. Emily's face.
I'm like still trying to follow what's happening.
So it's almost like you use witchcraft as a weapon.
Yeah, but what does this have to do with an elephant attack?
They just used it as like an example because it's in their culture, the way that they would see that it's an example that they would be familiar with.
Am I brain dead? What's happening? Okay, I'm trying to like understand this. So, for example, somebody gets killed by an elephant.
Mm-hmm.
They get killed by an elephant, but also witchcraft?
Say witchcraft, like say if you swap the word witchcraft with fate.
Okay.
That's one of the elements. Like everything has a witchcraft element. Everything is attributed to witchcraft.
Okay, that's
So
kind
it's
of what
not-
I was confused about is like Because if somebody has a heart attack, is it a heart attack and witchcraft?
Yes.
Okay.
No matter what, it's and witchcraft. If there's any misfortune being generated, it's down to witchcraft. So,
well, that's
like,
nice for
the
witchcraft.
yeah. In like the elephant being killed or elephant killing somebody example, the elephant is the vessel, but the witchcraft is the driving force. So it's like the accomplice.
Yeah. That is a very strange belief.
Yeah.
Or
Like
it's-
everything is caused by witchcraft. But I suppose, is it much different than people saying, well, this is in God's hands. God caused this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe in that either. So
Yeah.
So I guess it's one of those things where it's kind of like
If you believe
personal
it,
beliefs,
it's like
yeah.
it makes sense. Yeah.
Maybe that's why it didn't make sense to me, because I'm just like that doesn't make sense, because
Yeah.
it's not how I believe.
You would think that like you have your own, there's like a personal accountability, or sometimes shit things just happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, if you got like killed by an elephant, you got killed by an elephant.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Sometimes we're just nihilists.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
Nihilist and pine.
So, on the spiritual aspect of their beliefs, Zande tend to attribute both animate and inanimate beings a soul. Mbismo, under certain circumstances, is a soul separable from the body. In traditional beliefs, people's souls became ghosts once they died, and it was thought that both ghosts and the Azande supreme being, Mabori, shared a ghostly nature and lived in earth caverns in the bush. Ancestor spirits held a correspondingly higher significance in other regions where the word Mbori did not exist. Zagi referred to both the supreme being and the outside universe in general. So that's sort of like Mother Earth and all the things. Another huge facet of the Zande belief system is oracles. When they need information on a wide range of topics, they consult oracles. The Zande chiefs sought advice from oracles regarding various military decisions that they had to make prior to the arrival of European settlers. There are 3 different kinds of oracles used by the Azande. The first is the Benge, or the poison oracle, which can only be used by men. Boo.
Stay out of this.
It's the most potent oracle. No one ever questions this oracle's decisions, and they are always accepted. In the ritual associated with using the Benge oracle, a chicken is given a particular poison, and it is subsequently questioned. Whether the chicken dies or survives after receiving the poison for a predetermined period of time will determine the outcome. So they'll attribute, like, if it's dead, it means this. If it survives, it means this.
Oh, interesting.
For example, in adultery trials, because they had trials for adultery, or they still do, the Benge oracle can also be used to determine the guilt or innocence of the parties involved. There is a video called Witchcraft Among the Azante by John Ryle. It's very old, but the whole thing's on YouTube. It's an old BBC documentary. It actually shows this happening. The Benge oracle must hear the adultery case before deciding whether the woman should live or die.
What?
Because of course,
So
or whether or not she's,
oh my god, keep talking.
or whether or not she is telling the truth. The Benge oracle must be consulted by the chief. Once again, the chicken is fed this poison. The chicken will perish if the 2 people had sex while undressed, and that indicates adultery.
All right.
This will then be brought into court and presented as evidence that the 2 people who committed adultery were lying. The use of Benge was already severely discouraged in colonial times, and such oracles are now used very rarely and never officially. Doesn't mean it's not happening, it's just not officially.
Yeah.
There's also the second type, a termite oracle. Everybody can use the termite oracle, including children. To consult the termite oracle, you take a branch from 2 trees called the Kapoyo and the Dakpa. The answer is revealed by the oracle when the branches are placed inside a termite mound, and the asker waits all night to see which branch the termites devour. Due to its longer preparation time, the termite oracle is not as well liked as the poison oracle, or the Benge oracle.
It just takes way too long.
Yeah, it's just, it's so time consuming. Take all night, for God's sake. We could just let a chicken die right now. And the third type is the rubbing board oracle. It's the least costly but the least trustworthy oracle. It's described as a device resembling a Ouija board made of 2 small pieces of wood easily carried to be consulted anywhere and at any time. They have a second piece of wood and a wooden handle. If the second piece of wood sticks or catches, the answer to the question is revealed. So basically, you have to be attributing things. But once again, that's not as trustworthy, because if you know the piece of wood well, you'll know, like, if this catches, this means yes.
Yeah.
Because you know it's going to catch.
Right.
So obviously, the Azande spirituality, the Azande religion, is very much interspersed with Christianity within the region. There are people who believe in both, who practice both, and it's sort of, people will turn to their traditional beliefs if they have a problem before they will turn to Christianity, but they still believe in Christianity. Unfortunately, the Christian influence has ensured that the ghosts, who the people usually used to believe were their own benevolent ancestors, are increasingly associated with evil. And Mamori is today almost universally associated with the Christian god. So just like we saw with the Celtic religion, they co-opted a lot of the beliefs and absorbed them. There are numerous well-established Catholic and Protestant congregations within the Azande region, and they've had a significant and surface level impact on traditional beliefs and other aspects of culture. Another name for the Azande witchcraft is mangu. It's seen as an organic phenomenon, hereditary for the male line for men and the female line for women. So you could only pass it down to your daughter.
Okay. Suckers.
It need not be conscious. Its action is understood as psychic. A witch sends out his or her mabisbo, so the soul that we talked about, and it's said to be visible at night, and you can set it out to consume other souls.
Ooh.
Yeah, or the organs of the victim. Witches are also believed to cause other kinds of misfortune by less clearly defined means. Although their mode of action is mysterious, witches are not seen as in any way supernatural, but as just part of the normal order of things. So it's literally just part of life. Like, they believe in this so deeply.
Yeah. It's just,
You know?
like, completely integrated into their beliefs.
Yeah. They are believed to not be able to operate at a great distance, and commoners are usually unable to bewitch nobles or vice versa. So you can only bewitch people within your own, like, social class.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's all these people who online who, like, you know, they could be real or fake. I don't know. They're like, oh, I'm a psychic. Do you want a psychic reading? Like, we can just do a psychic reading. Like, you can, like, message them and then they'll, like, message you back. And that just seems very weird to me. I'm like, how can you practice it from that far away? I would imagine you would have to be with somebody in some capacity to kind of, like, get a sense of the energy from them or something like that. I don't know. I'm also not, like, a psychic or a fake who's taking people's money.
It just seems nuts that, like, you could form a connection like that from far away.
Yeah.
So, like I said, witchcraft is assumed to be at least a factor in all misfortune. To remedy it, it's really important to identify the witch. Identification was formerly achieved through divination by witch doctors or by means of various aforementioned oracles. Witch doctors are largely a phenomenon of the past, as are the close associations through which people formerly sought both offensive and defensive magic. For consultations, including the identification of witches, recourse in more recent times is often to generally female diviners who are prophetesses of the native Zande Christian church. So it's an amalgamation of both belief systems.
Okay.
So they're Christian, but also Zande. And just to finish us off, because I thought it was interesting, we have just 2 little snippets of other Zande folklore and beliefs. When an Azande child is born, at 4 days old, a fire of green leaves is made at the threshold of their home. The green leaves create a smoky fire, and the mother, with the infant in her arms, sits in the smoke for a short period. The smoke is believed to give the newborn infant strength. After the fire dies out, the ashes and any remaining leaves are strewn on a path leading to the village. This action is believed to protect the infant from illness and death.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's an adorable sort of ritual.
Right.
Yeah. And then just with because of the afterlife, if you're curious, The general Azande belief is that people return to life after death, reincarnated as an animal, and it's most often a lion. The most important royal chiefs may be reincarnated as leopards, pythons, snakes, warthogs, or rats. Some believe that lightning is the reincarnated spirit of a royal clan chief, and when an animal dies, it signifies the end of that specific life force. Thus, an Azande man will only kill an animal in an act of self-defense.
Nice.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And that is my episode, my meandering episode with lots of tangents on African witchcraft with a case study on the Azande magic system.
I like it. It was something I have heard very little about.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate learning a little bit about it.
And I think you and I, it can help for us to get out of our comfort zone a little bit, because obviously we're gravitated towards like white, Western, European, American folklore.
Yeah. I think for me that a big part of that has been just like not wanting to tread into any territory that could end up, you know, becoming one of those things where you are sort of like enforcing stereotypes or talking way beyond anything that involves you in any way.
Yeah. Or like maybe my fear is always that I'll not like do it justice.
For
That,
sure.
Like that I won't have time, or I won't like have all of the information that it deserves.
For sure.
Whereas like with a lot of stuff that we've covered on the podcast already, we might have a little bit of background knowledge on it already, so we know exactly what we're going to look for.
Definitely.
The hardest thing for this episode was narrowing it down, because I really didn't want to, like, it would be impossible to do an episode on just Africa.
Right.
Like, it's an entire continent. There
Yeah.
are so many different, and like I actually cut out loads of stuff that I had on different cultures because it was just too much and it was just an info dump.
Right. That's why when we were talking about this series, I was like, this could be huge.
Yeah.
Like an absolutely gigantic, this could be the whole podcast.
And we could do multi-parts on each episode alone, you know?
Right. Like it could have been like Italian magic and it could be 3 episodes. Like it could just be huge.
Exactly.
These episodes are sort of like little samplings of different areas and different beliefs and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And as always, if there's something that I missed or something that needs corrected or just something that you came across and you're like, hey, did you know this as well? Get in touch and let us know, because we're always here to learn. And we'll always try and give you a little shout out or acknowledgement if we remember in the next episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. We have more witchy stuff coming to you in 2 weeks' time.
And we have a guest.
Yeah, an Emily plus special guest episode.
Yeah. It's going to be so much fun.
It is. It's our first guest.
Is it really? It is.
Yeah, we haven't really had any. Like, we've had people like record voice clips for us, but
We've had your mom record a voice clip. Not people, your mom.
well, no, like our ghost story one. Like my friend Laura.
Wait, there was a voice clip?
Yeah, she recorded a voice clip about her dad seeing a ghost
Oh yeah.
by the river where he worked.
I was pregnant at that time, I'm sure, which means I don't
You
remember
are.
anything. I know we did a ghost episode. I remember hearing that story. Didn't remember that it was somebody who recorded it.
It's okay.
Whoops.
We'll forgive you.
Yeah.
Laura won't, but we'll forgive
Oh, I'm sorry, Laura. I didn't mean it.
Catch us again in 2 weeks' time for our guest spot. And do you want to say what the episode's about?
We are doing witchcraft in Mexico. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah, because I know very little about it.
For those who don't know, all my in-laws are Mexican. So we're going to step on over to Mexico. We're going to learn a little bit about that, even just like conversations with them. I don't know. There's just like various sort of like folk healing and folk beliefs that they like just have with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be interesting to like dive more into that, because I just hear like the stuff here and there. Like when Medardo grabbed my hair and he was rubbing it on his eye. And I was like, What are you doing?
Yeah, so to hear more things like that, come back to us in 2 weeks and make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that you are following us on all the social medias.
Circle back.
And circle back. I'm going to circle back and we're going to catch up. And we're going to... Oh, I can't.
Sorry.
I can't. I have been Niamh.
And I'm Emily.
And fuck yeah, folklore.
Fuck yeah, folklore. Da, 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 da. I'm making it fancy.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
I don't want to buy beef out of somebody's house.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it feels wrong.
I don't care if the cows are in the field. That's even worse. I can see how cute they are.
Yeah, you're like out there frolicking with the cows.